Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, go to the About section, check out our website, www.legendsofsuperstitions.com. All right, you can pick up t-shirts, swag, different stuff, coffee cups, hats, cool stuff. We're in kind of the winter. One of the problems right now is telling stories. Is there's so much going on and going in the mountains, and so you're kind of caught into what's happening in the present more than kind of looking back. So it gets tough sometimes to kind of bring back, because like I said, I'll be sitting there during the week reading about something that'll be, oh, I remember that trip. And today we'll go back to a trip, I have no idea, sometime in the mid 80s, maybe the late 80s. But I have no way to pinpoint it because I don't think before or after. And it's kind of a pair of stories, so it kind of goes, or definitely goes together. But I think everybody will find it of interest. It's one of those anecdotal stories. Before I get going on that, though, a book I haven't pushed a lot, member of the Treasure Hunt of the Year Awards, Mr. Mick McPherson. Memoirs of the Superstition Mountains Prospecting. He did a book, his first book, but then he followed it up with Recollections of the Impossible. Mick's an awesome dude, has both these books out. You can find them, I believe, in Goldfield Ghost Town, and I don't know where else, but look them up. Excellent reads. They're kind of more the perspective of the personal stories, not so much the Lost Dutchman Mine, but his experiences and his trips in there. Mick's a really cool guy, good friends with a lot of Dutch hunters. I think respected by most everybody for his knowledge and everything. So pick those books up if you do us a favor. It's great, great insight. Very similar to what we do here a lot on in Chasing Legends, his stories in there. That being said, this follows into that. This could be a chapter of Mick's book, I guess, in a way, because it's a kind of a cool anecdotal story. So sometime mid-late 80s, we're going back in the mountains, and I went with a group of guys. And the two guys I remember, one guy I remember, his name is Doug. And again, I don't use a lot of the last names because unless I'm in contact with people or I know someone recently, like a Randy Wright or someone, or Frank Augustine, that they're going to be fine with me telling the story. I generally shy away from all that. But anyways, we went in a group, 4 or 5 of us, and we went up Peralta Trailhead, went up Cardiac, one of my favorite ways to go in the mountains. Drop in, and we were at Barks Draw. Now, this was a 3-day trip or 4-day trip. First day, we actually camped down in the draw down in Barks. Not far, but kind of a little bit out of the stream bed by where the Peralta stone is, if everybody's familiar with that. There's a stone that says Peralta on it that's carved in it. There's actually 3 or 4 of them in the mountains, and we were in that area because we wanted to explore Upper Barks Canyon. In the gun sight area where you can see Weaver's Needle up in Barks Canyon. So we spent, it was nice because we spent 2-3 hours hike in, kind of set up camp, and then we got to explore, spend the rest of the day into the evening exploring the area. The next day we get up, nice breakfast, boom, up the hill, and we camp by Williams Camp. If everybody's familiar with that, it's up over the saddle where you get up into Needle Canyon and hit the trail there. We were just a little northwest probably of Williams Camp and found a nice little spot. We pitched there and decided to stay there. The weather was great and everything. And there we went over to where basically the rat hole tunnels that Charles Williams had found, which got Linsby into the whole Lost Dutchman Mine thing. And we explored that area and we're checking that stuff out, and not much to say, you know. We weren't assaying back then, and we probably didn't have any metal detectors, not that I can remember. But we spent a good portion of that day there, and again, camp for the night. The next day we get up and we traveled down, and we went down through Bluff Springs and down through past Miner's Needle, and we went out to what we call Spanish Graveyard or Castle Rock. And that was the third spot we were going to stop. And it was a very cool trip because we hit 3 specific spots and kept on the move, but had a pretty good portion of a day to explore them. Again, it was a nice day. We spent a lot of time covering the ground. It's probably Really nice for me because I remember we spent a lot of time just covering a vast amount of territory in the area, nooks and crannies. We're able to split up in groups of 2 and 3. And it was during this last part of the trip, during the last camp, at one point Doug had a hat, and it was his dad's hat. I don't know if it was his grandfather's as well. And he had this kind of cowboy brimmed hat, probably similar to mine, but it was really bleached out and had the sweat stains in it, never been dry cleaned. But he took it and set it up in a tree, and because it was kind of a warm afternoon, and he remember he'd put it up in the tree that evening before we had dinner. And we had dinner and stuff, and he just left it up there. The next day we get up, and big commotion's made in camp because his hat's gone, and he can't remember. And then he remembered, I put it up in the tree. So he figured somebody was pulling a prank, because we were known for pulling pranks. And everybody was like, I didn't do anything. I wasn't going to touch your hat. I didn't do anything. It wasn't windy, so we figured it didn't blow off, but we spent a good part of that morning for 2 or 3 hours looking for this hat. We went all over the place, up and down, tried to think of any possible way, because it wasn't windy, but we still, okay, what if something came through? All right, so we looked around. He was set that someone had it, made us open our packs. He went through and looked in. There was no room for it, really. It would have been hard to pack it in. But he went through, and he was he was pretty bad mood the whole rest of the day as we packed out, because he couldn't believe he lost his hat. And we're like, someone must have come through at night or something grabbed it. Couldn't think of what would have taken a hat, but someone must have taken the hat. So Doug loses his hat, and that's that. But the trip otherwise was great, but he never let that whole thing about the hat go. Now, about 2 months later, we make a trip in, and we come in on Tortilla Road off Apache Trail. We go down to the old Tortilla Ranch site. We park. And the idea is someone wanted to check something out. And I thought at first we went down Lost Dutchman, but we ended up by the Miller Mines. So the idea was they wanted to go by and spend a day by the Miller Mines, which we did, and explored around there. Then we pack everything up, and then we went south, way south of Tortilla, and spent a good probably 4 hours, 4.5 hours on the trail. So the idea was the second day, we're just going to head down. There wasn't much of a trail. It was kind of an old trail. It's interesting because this is an area Jesse Feldman's very interested in. And for his book, The Dutchman's Trail. And Jesse and I did talk. He talked about a route that way. Now, I only probably been that direction and out that way 3 or 4 times. And this was probably one of the first times, because there was some place or some camp or something someone had heard of and they talked about, but nobody was quite sure where it was. So we figured we'd take off down that way and explore and see if we could find that area. So it was basically having a map and then guesstimating where we were going. So we got up the next morning, pack everything up and everything. And during this trip, Doug went, but a couple other people went that hadn't been on the last trip, and a couple people weren't able to go. So we got everything together, and Doug had been talking about his hat because he'd had to replace his hat, and how on the last trip he got sunburned because he didn't have his hat. And there was a little bit of drama on all this, so he kind of made sure we were aware of it, that nothing of his should go missing this time. And so we started traveling. We're going south, and traveling this way, and there was this guy, Eddie, in the lead. And he's walking along, and then he looks over, and he sees something hanging in this tree. And he looks over, and we start going approaching, and he's looking at it, and he's kind of like, what's that? Because it was dark, and it was large, kind of a large object. And we get up, and we find it's Doug's hat. So we get up, and we approach it, and it's just kind of that moment where you kind of go like, we've been on the trail for probably 40 minutes or so. And we're not really on a designated trail, and we're just kind of looking at it. And Doug just walks over, matter-of-factly, through everybody, goes like, yeah, haha, guy's funny. Picks the hat off, takes the hat he had on, ties it to his back, puts it on, and just says some things I can't say. And we start to walk. And we're all looking at each other, because I'm thinking, I'm always in on the prank, so I'm thinking, that's a good one. How did you pull that off? And I keep thinking about it, and I think everybody else had the same thing as, well, who did that? How did this hat get up ahead of us? So we're thinking, it has to be Eddie, because Eddie was out in front. He kind of was picking the route. So he had to know we were going to go this way. And he hadn't been on the first trip. So how did he end up with the hat? And Eddie is like clueless. So we do the trip and the whole time. But once we camp the second night, we camp wherever we set up. And there was nothing really we ever found, nothing there, nothing to verify Jesse's claims or anything, but not to say it disclaims his stuff. But we never found what we were looking for at all. We're coming back the next day. It was a good trip. And on the way back is when Doug started going. He kept going, how did you guys manage that? Because it was starting to bother him too. What was it? How did you guys manage, like, to take my hat, get it out of the mountains, get it back here, get it almost an hour ahead of us on a trail we weren't going to take? And we're all like, dude, got no idea. And that's probably one of the most frustrating things is when someone's angry with you and you had nothing to do with it and you don't have a defense, because your defense is, I don't have a defense because I don't have any idea. And so we're doing it. We get back to the trucks and the vehicles and we're getting ready to ride out. And by that point, Doug's just weirded out because it'd been his dad's, and I think it might have been his grandpa's. I can't be assured of that. So Doug never wore the hat back in the mountains. Now, there's a couple more times I went out or met him somewhere and on. He wouldn't bring it back in the mountains because he considered the hat at that point, there was something weird about it. And he said the hat had vanished or disappeared or went down a portal or something by itself. And somehow a couple months later shows up in a completely different part of the mountains by itself. Now, did some guy go wandering through, pick up the hat, put it on while we were asleep in camp, and then the next time somebody shows up, they're down in Tortilla before us, and they just hung it back up on a bush? Who has any clue? Was Eddie far more a convincing liar than any of us could believe? Because he had that blank look of like, he didn't even know the whole story. He just knew that Doug had lost his hat the last trip. And he was just kind of like, what do you, I don't get it. And he had no idea. And so he was in the lead. And what I got to say is I don't remember anyone leaving camp unless they got up while we were sleeping, went randomly out, picked that place. And unless it was Eddie, I don't know how anybody would know. We would just happen to go by that area where we would actually see the hat. Or they just took a chance and it just worked out. So that's this week's story. It's kind of puzzling. It's one of those stories, and I know it's happened to people before, where you put something somewhere and you know just where it's at and it disappears. Now, I said this is kind of two-parter and you felt that was two parts, but I have a similar one to that because I know why it freaked Doug out, because later Doug would always kind of talk about it like he didn't get it. And I understood what he didn't get is he couldn't figure out a way it could have possibly happened. When my mom passed away, she had a digital camera, and I started using it and taking it up in the mountains. And I took it in the mountains all the time and took pictures. And so I would take pictures, and Randy Wright, I remember it was a silver digital. It was one of the early digital models. And we took it up there all the time. Well, I always kept it on a shelf, and it was actually in this room. It's different shelves I have in here now. But I always would put it on the shelf in the same place. I'd take out the SD card, load up the pictures, put it back in after I loaded it, may clear it, and then put it back on the shelf after I charged it. So it was a routine because that was the camera I took in the mountains. I was too cheap to buy my own digital. I had a free digital. So Randy and I had been taking this camera up in the mountains, and very oddly enough, is one day I went in to get it for a trip, it was missing. And it was one of those trips where I didn't take any pictures. I don't think I even had a smartphone at that point. I probably had a flip phone, and those pictures sucked. So it drove me crazy. So I ended up buying, and I have around here several different cameras because I bought another digital and then another digital, another digital. And Trevor will remember there's several around here laying around on shelves somewhere, packed somewhere. But I bought these other, and a year goes by because I don't know what happened to the camera. And I missed it because it was kind of beat down, but it still took pretty good pictures. And it was kind of that one I was so used to, you know, once you start using it, you know, all your little settings and stuff. And it was kind of very basic. Well, after like a year, I come in the room one day and I look over and the camera's just sitting on the shelf. And I look at the camera and I'm just like, what the hell? And I inquired everybody because I figured someone had to have found it sitting somewhere or stuck behind something, and I had missed it, and they just went in and put it back on the shelf. And everyone, Trevor was too small at that point, might have been big enough to find it and put it there. None of the other kids could have reached up there and put it up there. And I was just like completely thrown off. So I was doing the Doug thing of like, you did this, or you found it, you put it there, and you're denying. You want me to think I'm crazy and all. And I was told basically, no, your mom put it there because she knew you were still looking for it. What really made me weirded out by it was when I took the camera and I opened it up and went to look at the SD card, because I thought, wow, did I ever load those pictures off the SD card? Is the SD card I took out and then I put in the computer was all the last pictures my mom took on the camera. I'd never seen them. I'd never had the SD card. All I can come up with is somehow I came home, put the camera in the wrong spot, or charged it, uploaded the pictures, switched it out, found this other SD card, wanted to see what was on it so I could clear it out, never looked at it or had no memory of looking at it, somehow put it in the wrong place, and then later someone found it, or I even put it there without realizing it, not thinking I had, oh, there's the camera. Just coincidence. That's all I can think of, because otherwise it's similar to Doug's hat. Is how did it there and then reappear literally in the same place, not like Doug's, but show up? And that's a very true story. And that the thing that weirded me the most was that clip, because I was in there and I started looking at it and I was thinking, why would I have that SD card in there? Because I remember the last trip we made, and it was all pictures just before she died. The last photograph she took with that camera of, I think it was Sarah's birthday party, or Sarah's second or third birthday party. So it was very weird to me to look at it and realize I'd never seen these. And wow, I didn't even know that existed. So there you go. Kind of a weird trip in the teleporting or transporting, or what do you call it? Teleporting hat in the Superstition Mountains. Don't know what happened to all those guys. That was a couple good trips. Even sometimes if you don't find anything, any day in the mountains is a good day. And that was certainly. I don't know why that story just suddenly popped back in my head. It had been so long since I thought about it and those trips, because they were good trips, but I think sometimes those trips get buried because nothing really, other than his hat disappearing and showing up on a different trip, none of it really stood out. Couldn't tell you other than, we just went to those sites, what we did other than just mess around all day. And we were younger then, so a lot of times you just kind of pissed your day away. But anyhow, want to thank everybody for watching. Was out and recently ran into an awful lot of people who recognize me. I don't know how people recognize me at 30, 40 miles an hour going down a dirt road and suddenly pull over, and I think they need help. And they're people there with their kids going, hey, we love your videos. We loved you on History Channel. And I'm like, how did you even know it's me? So that quick, too, just look it over and, but a lot of them say they always look for me. And I'm thinking, man, that's just kind of weird to me. I don't look for me very often. I guess I don't look for me very much at all. But anyways, there you go. But thank you for everybody, all the great, all the great stuff, the comments and stuff and everything. We keep moving forward and telling stories and history and that kind of stuff. And as we're working on stuff, getting out in the mountains and got some great trips we're planning right now. And you guys will start seeing more and more footage. I really wanted to run some footage of a recent trip, but I just kind of wanted to hold back because it was an area I don't want to even reveal at all in pictures or any video or film until we've done another trip or two into it and I've looked at it closer, because it's a very cool place. I want to kind of get down what my thoughts are and what I'm thinking, I'm seeing there. And there was a couple things that puzzled me, and it'll be much more interesting for me to kind of sit on it and get back out and then check at it and then see what your thoughts are. But there, great teaser. I don't know. But anyways, until the next time, thank you so much for watching. We all appreciate it. Everybody's doing well. I hope you're doing well. And remember, until the next time, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.